Greetings, Patrick here. 8 questions with. Welcome to a weird Tuesday here in southeastern Michigan. Woke up to rain, torrential rain a couple of times, and now I'm looking out at a beautiful sunset. It is still overcast, but it's just a weird day. We're supposed to get another one tomorrow. Well, we are here for the first show of the week, and we are going to be talking with cryptozoologist and paranormal investigator Brian Godhard of Cryptid Paranormal. So we're going to talk all things cryptid and paranormal. Now, you guys know I love cryptids. Cryptids is that's weird. Hold on 1 second. My phone being a little bit goofy on me here. That was a little different. Yeah. Let's see if I can put this in. All right. Cryptid is well, it all depends who you talk to. I mean, it's described as a pseudoscience. If strange creatures walk among us. But there's probably been too many encounters, whereas there's definitely cause to believe that there's something out there. We're always discovering new species. Here we are. Even now, we're discovering a brand new species of shark, and also discovered a new species of insect in Australia that is about as big as your arm. It's like the heaviest insect recorded. It has some weight to it. The point is, we're always getting new species, new animal types, and who's to say what we don't? Who's to say? We don't know exactly. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. As far as or what we're going to discover. Okay, now that's twice now it's done that. Okay, I want to make sure everything is fine. Okay. Huh, that's really strange. This is a brand new phone and it shouldn't be doing that. That is weird. Okay, hopefully I won't be doing that all night. Hey Dominic, how are you? Hey Cheryl and Anthony. Got a new phone here and it's acting up, so let's just keep our fingers crossed that I don't know what's going on with it, but uh yeah, Brian is he's one of those who believes also in cryptids, and he goes looking for them. There's patches in the United States where I'm gonna have to see if this actually affects my show. Hopefully not. This is really weird. And it happens right, and of course, it happens right here, right now, right, all day long, nothing. And yeah, okay. Well, at least, oh my gosh, this is not good. Hold on 1 second. Let me uh, let me go out and come back in and see what's going on. No idea why this is doing this. This means I have to go down to. This is really frustrating. Yeah, this is the first time it's ever acted up, but I'm gonna go try something real quick, just in case. I'm not so sure how much is the phone and how much is if it's StreamYard or not, because it's been perfectly fine all day, and then I sign up and uh, so um, okay. Uh, well, this is not fun. All right. Well, we'll just, of course, we are doing paranormal tonight and cryptid, so I guess I should have expected this. Um, hey, Lady Valerie, how are you? Hey, Jerry. Hey, Caveman. And Anthony is here, and we'll keep our fingers crossed. So far, so good. I had no idea what's maybe a spooky time. I don't know. Um, anyway, Brian is he is a paranormal investigator. He's done several investigations. And it's interesting is he mentioned, which I didn't know about this, that I knew that I know that Sasquatches people talk about Bigfoot roaming around, and there is a large patch of ground in Ohio, a huge massive park that seems that oh, okay, the real Bigfoot murder case here. No, no, I would not be surprised. I mean, I think the evidence. Me and Brian were talking about this earlier off camera, and we'll talk. Well, actually, I'm going to save that because I want to talk about that when he gets here. But I think it's interesting. It seems like the more advanced that we get in technology, the less you hear about these creatures, right? Like you don't really mean yes, you have dedicated investigators like Brian uh, um, and other paranormal groups and cryptologists, um, but not in the public eye. It's now like it's almost like a niche thing, right? Whereas when I was growing up, I can't tell you how popular the Loch Ness monster was. Man, and the same thing with Bigfoot. There were documentaries on Bigfoot. There were documentaries on the Loch Ness monster, if it was real or not. Um, and I mean, it was they have week-long specials on our TV stations, sort of like Shark Week, as is on Discovery Channel. They used to have that back in the '70s. They used to have a week of just dedicated Bigfoot programming. And of course, you go back and probably look at it now, and it'd probably be a little bit silly. But the fact of the matter is, it was really, really popular. And people were going out there looking for Bigfoot. They were doing the same thing back in the '70s, and probably way before that, as they are now. But the general public himself, we don't hear about it so much because of the overwhelming amount of news, but we don't get any information. We don't get any new information. Nothing really gets to the surface of in the public's eye. Same thing with the Loch Ness monster. We don't know. if Nessie is there. Was she ever there? I mean, who's to say that she was there? She died, and they took the bones out. I mean, if I'm a government, I have access to satellites. I'm gonna poke that down. It's gonna be worth it's gonna be worth it to have a satellite hit the Loch Ness, hit the lake. And who's to say that there really was something there? Could you imagine that? Could you imagine the oval? I mean, it would just be one of the biggest things of the century if they actually discovered that there really was a dinosaur that lived in the Loch Ness. Now, again, a lot of people could sit there and say, "Well, that's just silliness." Well, you have Jurassic Park, which is based on science. They're still trying that today. They're still looking to bring the dinosaurs back. They are looking to do that. They're looking for active DNA. They're trying to bring it back. It's not fantasy. It's not just imagination. It's reality. Um, let's see. My cryptid is Mothman. Yeah, I've heard about that. See, Ben said him and his friend were fishing. When they came back, they saw a pack of Bigfoot. He thought his friend was going to sacrifice, so he took out his friend first. Oh my gosh, really? Who's to say, right? Who's to say? And the thing that is so easy to in today's public, the way the media is controlled today, it's so easy to squash whatever you don't want out there. It's so easy to discredit. It is. It's you could stream you could do a live stream with you eating lunch with Bigfoot, and believe me, by 5 o'clock it could be scrubbed from the net, um, because they don't want you to know. And they don't want the general public to know. One, they don't want a mass of 1 million people going out there trying to find Bigfoot. Um, I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I really don't know if there's a Bigfoot or Loch Ness monster, but I think there is a strong possibility of it. There's a strong possibility because in this world of today, of course, now you get all these all these conspiracy theorists, which is part of the government's disinformation plan. What's the best way what's the best way to hide the truth? By not hiding it. It's like or just let them run. Just let them run. And then, and that's what will happen. People will just, they look at him and they see him running and he's talking, and next thing whatever true science or true facts or true clues that the person may have had, it's all wiped out. With just a few nods here and there. Um, yeah, they did a movie on that, the Mothman Diaries, or I think it was called. I had that movie. I have not watched it yet. But that is crazy, though, Ben. I have to go look up more about that case. Um, especially if they busted him and he's stone cold sober. You know what I'm saying? Mothman prophecies. Could you? That would be the key thing with that guy. If they busted him and he came in and he said he was stone cold sober, and he said he repeated his story. You know. Of course, then we have the hey, New York gal, welcome, welcome. So we'll be talking with Brian Godhard here in a few minutes. My phone seems to have settled down. I have no idea what was that all about. Larry Doyle Sanders is the name of the dude. I'm gonna look that up. Did he get, obviously he got convicted. Did he get convicted of murder, or was he declared insane? I'm sure he got convicted. Wow. I've heard cases of the occult where they do that stuff too, and religious fanatics too. They do that sort of thing too, so it's not unheard of. People, people get frightened really easily. All right. Well, now things to be settling down. Okay, so I can tell you what's going on here in here on the channel. Uh, got some new film reviews up. So we got some new reviews up. Dollar Theater is still going strong. Uh, we just um, we just released our review of a movie called Murder of a Cat, which is a dark comedy, which was pretty interesting. Um, and I it was different, that's for sure, different. Um, and then of course this week we're also doing action. We're doing Action August. So for the next couple of weeks we're doing action movies, and you guys can vote on what me and the Cheetah watch as far as action goes. Somebody already sent me a text saying that why don't you just show the Cheetah in action? That might be a good idea, but I like my feet. If I did that, or if I try to give them some treats, I mean, I might lose a hand or two. I don't think that's kind of action we want to see. But we are doing action and adventure in The Last Dragon. Man, I watched that movie recently. I you know I you know what I would tell you about that, Ben? Now, Julius Curry played the Shogun in New York. Sure enough, right? Shogun of Harlem. Sure enough. But I gotta tell you, as much as I liked him in that role, he did a Western series called The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr., and he did it with none other than Bruce Campbell. It was Bruce Campbell's one big time of primetime fame. And unfortunately, it was unfortunately it came out on Fox. Fox was just getting going. So they were looking to do some programming. So they came up with this show called The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr. And it had Bruce Campbell and it had Julius Curry. For the first 13 or 14 episodes, it was like an arc. And what happened was they were Briscoe County was chasing down the man who killed his father, and then Julius Curry plays this bounty hunter who's after Briscoe County because he got set up for it. Um, they did that for the first season, but people were writing in saying, "Hey, instead of having Julius Curry's character chase Briscoe, why don't you have them come together?" And so that's what they did. They finished up their arc, which is unheard of. It was unheard of back then. I mean, they weren't doing arc, especially on a Western series. But after the first 14 episodes, they wrapped it up. Then they made it so that Briscoe County, and this is funny, Briscoe County and Julius Curry, they went to work for the government, investigating all sorts of weird things. Think of it sort of like a Wild Wild West, with not quite as much violence. It was a lot more fun. Um, and it ran for 30 episodes, which was completely unheard of for an hour-long series. Most series were 22 to 24 episodes long, and only 24 if they got the ratings to justify it. Well, this is Briscoe County's first episode, so first season. So there wasn't anything to go back on, so they just went with it. Now, after the first season, after 30 episodes, it did really reasonably well, but it came down to where Fox could the next season came around, and there was only they had room for two shows left. They were going to do they could renew Briscoe County, or they were going to do another. They're going to bring a comedy into play, and they decided at the last minute, literally the last minute, that they were going to go with the comedy. So Briscoe County got canceled after 1 year, and the comedy that took Briscoe County's place was none other than Married with Children. That's terrible. I like the Bundys, but I sure as hell love Briscoe County a hell of a lot more than I did Married with Children. Maybe that's an unpopular point of view, but I love Briscoe County. I thought it was great. And I saw that Fox had released it, the whole series, and there for a while there, you could find it pretty easily. I got mine at where did I get my copy at? I think I got it over at Big Lots. I think I got it at Big Lots for like $10, or maybe it was Walmart, one of the two. But all I know is I got it for $10, and I thought it was such a cool deal, and I bought one. I still have it. Um, but Julius Curry was so cool in that show. He was really fun to watch. And I thought him and Bruce Campbell definitely were, and the funny thing is like when I see people talk of Bruce Campbell and they talk to him a lot at all the different conventions, man, I hear like people talk about Spider-Man, they talk about, Evil Dead, Ash versus Evil Dead. I mean, they talk about those, but me, if I got a chance to talk to Bruce Campbell, first I would tell him that Bubba Hotep was brilliant. That was brilliant. But man, I would love to hear some stories about Briscoe County Jr. That was fun. All right. My my guest should be here momentarily. I put my Facebook up to make sure that if he needed to ping me, he'd be all right. All right. Now we touched. Ben Grimm told a story about that case in Oklahoma, but of course we're going to ask this question a little bit later on as well. But I'll ask it now just to get some conversation going. But has anybody ever had an encounter with a paranormal spirit or a cryptid? I have never run across anything cryptid wise. Um, Paranormal, yes, yes. I've had my fair share of fun and adventure, but I have never encountered a cryptid. Um, I know that it's very passionately, people are very passionate about it. Um, there's a lot of, and there, I know it's called a pseudoscience, which I think is a disservice. I do. I think it's a disservice. I think that there's enough there. And who's this? Honestly, who's to say? I mean, isn't cryptids something like creatures we haven't seen before, or that we suspect that they are? I think that every new species that we discover now, I think that in a way, aren't they cryptids? Because we don't know who the hell what they are. All we know is that they're there. It's like until they catch them and then they put them. They give them their species or whatever. But until that time, I mean, they're unknown creatures. Imagine being down there deep in the Mariana Trench and see all these weird fish and stuff like that. Man, you're just going to be sitting there looking at that going like, what kind of creatures are these? Because you just don't know what they are. And who's to say that if there is a Bigfoot creature, who's to say that, who's to say? Um, It'll be the same thing with the Yetis. Yetis are basically I mean, there's different versions of Bigfoot in the world. You got Yetis over in the in the south of Asia. You have Wendigos in Canada, even though they did branch down to North America, but it is a Canadian folklore. And then we have the Sasquatch, the Bigfoot. Um, and the thing about the Bigfoot is it's been everywhere, anywhere where there's been woods or forest, which really runs true to people not, I know some people say, well, I've seen a Bigfoot in my city. Probably not in the city, because I don't think Bigfoot's really going to the city. I do think if Bigfoot's out there, they go to the parks. They're smart. They go to where people can't find them. Okay. Oh, I remember in the 70s there was a TV show called, and this really this was like if you talk to people of the show, they will tell you that this is their favorite episode. But there was a show called The $6 Million Man in the 70s starring Lee Majors, and he played Colonel Steve Austin, and you know, he was the bionic man, the $6 Million Man. He had bionic legs and an arm and an eye. And pretty much the show had always been based on reality. You know, like he was a secret agent type, and he would you know, he would go to do missions for the government or what have you. And then they got then the series they, you know, decided to do a little bit more fantasy, more you know, more fantasy science fiction. So they had Steve investigate some people gone, you know, that have been seeing a strange creature, a Bigfoot, around a logging camp. So, you know, and they sent Steve Austin to investigate it. And so Steve Austin goes, investigates, and sure enough, you know, he discovers there's a Bigfoot creature. And so Steve and the Bigfoot, they have a brawl. And at first, Steve, Steve is he was getting waxed. And then the Bigfoot came and got him. You know, came and you know and knocked him down and then ran. And then Steve went inside this he went inside this where he saw the Bigfoot went to, and it turned out that the Bigfoot was also like it was like an android, and it was a species, an alien species had crash landed on Earth. And so while they're trying, you know, while they're watching us, you know, they're trying to fix their ship. So Steve had to go in there and help them, you know, to get off the planet. And it was such a popular show, and I really think that it inspired a lot of, you know, I remember the surge of interest in Bigfoot when that happened. Not so much the robot Bigfoot, mind you, but just the Bigfoot in general. It was a very popular. It was a very popular episode. So much so that they came back. They did two more. They did two more episodes. I did an episode. I did another one with Steve Austin, and then they did one with the Bionic Woman. If I'm not mistaken, I do believe it was Ted Cassidy, the gentleman who played Lurch in Adam's Family. I think it was either him or I want to say it was him, but he played the Bigfoot. It was a lot of fun. That show was a lot of fun, and they got a little bit more out there as the show went on because you know you could only send Steve on so many secret missions, right? You had to bring in some whimsy and some fantasy into it. So and you know it worked. Of course, two other shows I could think of that really you know really embrace the cryptid storylines was the X Files. Wow, right? I mean, when you think of cryptid series, you know you know of promoting the fact that there you know there could be out there. The X Files, they managed to do that, and they managed to do it very very well. I mean, it ran for 10 years, 10 or 11 years. I know the original cast left after the ninth year, but still, every Friday we will be in, and I believe me, the iron is not lost here. We'd be on Fox TV watching, watching the X Files, and they would have several different episodes where, you know, uh, David Duchovny's character's sister had disappeared, and he was looking for her, and they went across all these different type of cryptid creatures, all sorts of aliens, or just you know who the hell knows, right? And that show did a lot. It did a lot to, you know, a lot of people will watch the show, you know, to be completely entertained. And I dare say you probably got about a quarter of the people that are watching the X Files that probably believe a lot of what they're saying. Again, it's like, how do you hide the truth? You hide out in plain open. You know, it's like if I tell them there's a, you know, if I tell them there's a Bigfoot, people are gonna laugh at me. They're gonna sit there and say, "Oh yeah, you're full of shit." Okay, all right, okay. But whereas in fact, you are telling the truth. No, it's not your fault that no one believes it, but you are telling the truth. You are seeing what you're seeing. And if people don't believe you, that's not really on you, it's really on them. But you are telling the truth. So a lot of people were really interested in what the X-Men were, like, wow, I know they call it the creature of the week or whatnot, but they did a lot of research on that show. There was a lot of thought that Chris Carter put into the show. And I I didn't get to watch it as much as I wanted to. Yeah, that now this is funny, Cheryl. What's really funny about this is like I go to the library every Tuesday. I've been going there for 3 years solid, every Tuesday, every single Tuesday. I've gotten a lot of TV shows from there. I've gotten a lot. One of the show, I mean, before I did the library, I would, me and my buddy Catfish, we would go around to different stores and whatnot and hunt. And even when Romy was with me and we would go around and look, it was still hard to find. I know that the X Files was a very popular series, but in the 3 years that I've been going to the library, I have not found a single episode, a single season of the X Files. Now, I know the odds, it's not big odds. It's one place, one time per week, but the percentages say that a very popular show like the X Files, we should have run across a season by now. You should have. You just how I found more Star Trek, which is probably the hardest thing to find for me. I have more Star Trek than I do X Files. I have like combined all the Star Trek series. I have probably like 12, 13 seasons. I have none of the X Files. Um, uh, they did have Millennium come in, but they were charging $40 for it. $40 at the library. And boy, yeah, me and the lady, we had a nice cup of tea about that. Um, but I would have thought that I would have run across a season by now. Have not come across a season. I'm not so sure people actually gave up their X Files. I think there's a lot of people out there that have held on to that series. I really do. I think there's a lot of more people out there. I mean, the people who bought the series believed a lot of what was being told to them through the stories. Um, I don't know where my guest is at. I'm gonna have to ping him again and go like, "Hey, um, let's see." Oh, hold on one second. So it is StreamYard that is acting up. Wow, that's just insane. Man, that's really his link didn't work. I believe it too. I believe it. Let me send him his let me send him a fresh link here. And see, you know what it is. See, it's people don't want us to be talking about this. All right, wow. Well, StreamYard is really really messing up here today. Waffles is here. Definitely Waffles is here. Channel YouTube's most horror channel name is back. Um, Wish you were here during the whole of baseball season when both our teams are doing well. So okay, so Brian's going to be coming in here now because now that I actually sent him, that's so weird. Okay, yeah, yep, that's it. Okay, all right, he'll be here. Oh, okay, awesome. Take pictures. Take lots of pictures. The other series I really enjoyed a lot. It was not live action. It was not live action, but I certainly loved it anyway. It was a cartoon, and I remember finding part of a season at Dollar Tree, um, and I was like, okay, what is this show? And it was called The Secret Saturdays. And so it came out on Cartoon Network, and I looked on the back of it. I looked on the back of it, and on the voice actors, that's what's got me. I had Nicole Sullivan and I had Phil Morris, and I'm saying I'm so there. So I bought the season that I had, or the it was like the season one, volume one. So they divided the season up into two. So I got that, and I said that's what I'm going to watch. I'm going to check this out. Wow, that was a very cool cartoon. Very cool, and it wasn't just for kids either. It wasn't definitely not just for kids. I was really surprised at how mature the series was. Like it was not your average cartoon. Of course, I got to say this. I got to say this. And it's really funny because I see people watching like old Bugs Bunny cartoons or old Tom and Jerry cartoons, and they sit there and say, or Popeye, and they go like, "Man, that's when cartoons were great, man. Nothing will ever take the cartoons away from yesteryear." I just want to sit there and say, "What are you nuts?" Uh, I love old cartoons, but man, the animation of today, it blows anything away when I was growing up. I mean, it really did. I mean, they have some cool shows, but for just to engage the imagination and not selling toys. I mean, there's a lot of really good animation shows out there, and to me, that's another tremendous platform to launch people's imaginations. Like that's what the Secret Saturdays were. They were a family that traveled around the world, and they were looking for cryptids. That's what they did, and they had their son and a cool creature, and that's what they did. And it wasn't just one of those 5 minute everything's going to be all right type of cartoons. It had some thought some thought into it, and the writing was really good as well. Okay, I have no idea why he has not shown up. I have given him the link twice now. Okay. Okay. All right. I still think he'll be here. I think it's StreamYard. I looked up and the link did go through. So besides, what more could you be doing on a Tuesday than talking about cryptids and creatures and paranormal? Um, Speaking of paranormal, I guess it's almost that time. The last Conjuring movie is going to be coming out, and that also deals with the supernatural and ghosts and stuff like that. I recently just saw. I know the movie Weapons has come out. That's a supernatural horror. People are really digging the story for that. I watched a show called. I watched a movie, and I'm going to be dropping a review in a couple of weeks called Presence. Um, we had a fun discussion about that movie at the library. Oh, there he is.
Doing?
Are you there? There he is.
How you doing?
Good, good. Were you being bounced from the link that I sent you? Was it just bouncing you out?
It just had me backstage.
Wow, that is so. Yeah, well, it was bumping me off earlier. StreamYard was kicking me off, bouncing me off. So I'm not really surprised by that. But you know what? This is such a rich topic anyway. So it was pretty easy actually to keep talking until we got this get this on the road. That's really weird. But I'm glad you're here now, Brian, because this is going to be a fun discussion, and I'm really excited that you're here. And this is a subject that I could talk about all night. Um,
Me
especially
too.
the especially I'm fascinated with the cryptid side. See, I've had paranormal experiences that I've had, but I have never had a cryptid experience, and I really like to have one. I'd like to be able to sit there and go fishing one day and then go and see Bigfoot down the stream. That would be just like, that's everybody's dream, right?
That it is.
Um, so now your company is your investigation company is Cryptid Paranormal. So you do both cryptid hunting and paranormal hunting. I guess my first question to you would be, what would you do if you ran across both of them at the same time?
Get really excited. um, yeah, I mean, depending on what theory you go down on the cryptid route, they're in some ways they're connected. Um, there's different. I guess hypothesis would be the correct word on where Sasquatch comes from, how he stays hidden, things like that. There's one school of thought that believe that he's some kind of an interdimensional being. It's more of a newer trend over the last 10 or 20 years or so, it seems like. Personally, I think he's biological. I don't think there's anything particularly supernatural about him, but
No.
that is one of the major trains of thought out there these days, that there is a connection between the paranormal and a lot of the cryptids, that there's some correlation from where they come from, how they get here, how they move about, why you don't see them as much as you would expect with the level of expansion human civilization has done over the years.
Do you think, because I believe this, and I'm definitely I believe this, but to me, like I said, the best way to hide the truth is to put it out in the open. And I just feel like when you hear people do that, talk about those theories, you sort of wonder, like, so where did they come from? Like, you just can't really wrap your head around that somebody's down there in mom's basement thinking about this. you think about it, it's a lot bigger than that. To me, it's like I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna spread some more disinformation by saying that it's an interdimensional being. I'm with you. I think Bigfoot. If we do find a Bigfoot, his would be a biological. No, I don't think he's an alien. I don't think that only happened on the $6 million man. By the way, yeah.
I remember that episode where they actually he was from Earth, but the ship crashed, and then they gave him bionics to fix him when they damaged him in the crash.
I love that episode. I was like, that's the best $6 million episode ever. But you think about it. To me, it's like you start a rumor like that, and people go into that, and they start expounding on that theory, and you sit there and you hear them talk about it like, yeah, he's an alien, and then what you know is like all they've done is just muddy the water. It's so thick, and it's like who benefits from that? There's only one person, there's only one entity that benefits from the clouded water when it comes down to investigating a cryptid, and that would be governments. They don't want us to know. So why not try to introduce now I know people say, well, you sound like a conspiracy nut, but am I? I mean, history is over and over and over and over about this, how governments use this information. Yeah, we're still doing it today. So to do something like that with a cryptid, it's not outside the realm of possibility. Who's to say? I think
there was. During the 80s, when the last Mount St. Helens eruption, there were a lot of sightings of black helicopters carrying some kind of large, massive animal away. And some of the witnesses swear it was a Bigfoot, that the government was airlifting them somewhere. I don't know whether it's true or not. I've never had the opportunity to talk to any of the witnesses, but it is an interesting hypothesis. And then as you said, we see disinformation today. We know it's happening. So was that it's the disinformation that they were airlifting them out of there, or was that what they're trying to cover up with the disinformation? It wouldn't surprise me if the government's covering it up for some reason or another. I can't think of a reason off the top of my head per se, unless there's some kind of either that they're more of a threat than we realize, or they're more intelligent than we realize. It would be the only two reasons I would think that they would intentionally cover it up. I don't know what else they would gain by not disclosing it.
And and a lot of people, again, it's like you think that this sounds silly, but look at Area 51. I mean, Area 51 has been it's been a mystery for years and years and years. And and you think in today's modern world, what do you got that you're hiding? They're not telling us. They don't always tell us everything. I mean, hell, we know more about where our nuclear missiles are located at in the Midwest than we knew what's inside Area 51. Yeah. I mean, that's public. There's more public knowledge about our nuclear defense than there is about Area 51 and what's in the base there. There's more.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. I have not heard about the Bigfoot on Mount St. Helens, and I will say if they did capture it, though, that thing was dead, because Mount St. Helens killed everything around it. I mean, the whole damn mountain.
Supposedly that's why they were taking them out, is that they were saving them. There was some kind of effort in place to get them out of there, to relocate them somewhere else. Which
what would be a good reason why? I mean, I'm sure you discussed this. I'm sure this is your very popular Facebook group, by the way, too. I'm sure there's a reason why. I mean, I'd like to hear some of the reasons why people think that the government keeps them safe. I mean, why? It's like, I mean, why couldn't you? I mean, I guess that's what they do, right? They have do they have a certain sanctuary for them?
So there's different speculations out there. It depends on how deep down the conspiracy theory hole you want to go. There are those that think that's why national parks were really created, is for sanctuaries for these things to disappear into. National forests, national parks, state parks. This is just avenues of travel for these guys. And it was created for them to basically remain hidden from us for whatever reason, to remain a habitat to them. If you go down the ancient origin theory that there was either some extraterrestrial intervention on our evolution, or we're not from this planet to begin with, that's a whole other conspiracy theory of why the government doesn't want us to know that, because if someone examined one of these things, it would unlock more questions than answers when they got to look at the DNA of one of those things. And the truth is, if you think about it, we are share 99% of our DNA with a chimpanzee. There's only one chromosome difference. So a chromosome can obviously make a humongous difference in organisms. So for that, a lot of people consider Sasquatch the missing link. And
do you think they could? Because I was mentioning how before you got here that even now, I mean, a lot of people call this like they call the cryptology a pseudoscience, but I position this. I say this, that for pseudoscience, we sure have spent a lot of money into it, because you look at Jurassic Park, and you look at that and you're like, yeah, that's a fantasy story. Michael Crichton was a medical doctor. That's what he was. He was a real doctor. He wasn't just an author. He had a very scientific mind. They're still trying to, every time there's a dinosaur find or whatever, they're trying to extract DNA out of it so they can create a dinosaur or create what they can find. And to me, it's like, why would you bother doing all that if you didn't have a purpose for it? So do you think there's a chance that like that's the reason why because how old does a Bigfoot live? I mean,
that's a great question, and there's a lot of debate in that. Most of us are guessing that they probably have some kind of a similar lifespan to ours, just because they do appear to be like us in a lot of. Truth is, we have no idea until we get a sample of their DNA. There's
Now I'm starting to think I know.
So sorry, you cut out there for a second.
No, I was gonna say, I see you're having a little tech problems over there, and I'm thinking, I have a feeling Big Brother's watching us on this one. It's like, but go ahead with your thought. Oh, I'm telling you, you can't talk about these things. See, soon as we start talking about Bigfoot, look what happens. All right, he's back, I think. All right, sheesh, I'm telling you, I'm starting to. Oh, there he is. You know what it is? I'm telling you right now, they got satellites watching us. They're hearing us. They don't. That's what it feels like, doesn't it? um, so yeah, so it would be
Wouldn't
very
surprise me.
interesting. No, it really wouldn't surprise me either. I'll tell you the truth. Honest to God, I would not be shocked. Um, let's go back to the
Uh-oh.
beginning while we still got you here.
Having technical
So let's go,
difficulties.
yeah, maybe if we talk about beginning your origins, how did you get involved in cryptology and paranormal? What inspired you to get into the field? And he got froze again. Oh, this is just weird. This is such a weird. This is weird. First me, and then him. Yeah, he got kicked out. Yeah. Let's see if he's in Los Angeles. Oh. Where are you at, Brian? Where are you in California by chance?
No, I'm in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay, okay. Wow, I've never had any bad connections in Ohio. The worst connections I always have are in Los Angeles. Wow. Are you having bad weather?
No, I have full bars and everything is
So it's just StreamYard. All right. Uh, I tell you what, we'll try to soldier on. We'll try to soldier on. But for some reason, this keeps going on. What I'm thinking we should do is maybe come back and try to do this on a Saturday afternoon. And so I think we'll have less traffic. Maybe that's what's going on too, and maybe we'll have a better chance of because I'm totally fascinated, and I think it's funny as hell that we're getting kicked out. Because before you got on, my phone was started acting totally strange, and it was kicking me out too. So I was like, okay, my phone hasn't been acting up at all. I just got this phone, and now all of a sudden now we're gonna go be talking about cryptology and paranormal. Now my phone's decides it wants to be haunted. All right, that's par for the course. So anyway, tell us a little bit more about your origins in the paranormal or in the cryptids.
okay. I've always been obsessed with cryptids and the paranormal as a whole, as far back as I can remember. A lot of unsolved mysteries in the 80s, growing up watching sightings in the 90s, things like that. And it was just always fascinating to me that there's something out there. I like the mystery. It's intriguing to me. I like the idea of searching for something. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
when I was about, go ahead. Oh, when I was about 16, my parents had a place. I grew up in the west side of Cleveland, but they had a place we used to camp out at the weekends in Pennsylvania. And my best friend and I were playing paintball at night, of course. We decided to go out as like 10, 11 o'clock at night, somewhere between 10 and midnight in that neck of the woods. And we were taking shots at each other all weekend. This was the second night we were there. So we figured we'd change it up and go out at night, maybe take some laser pointers and tape them to our guns. They were just cheap Walmart paintball guns. They weren't anything crazy. We were just wearing t-shirts, you know what I mean? But
Right.
still, it was fun. And I had planned the double back, and I was going to sneak up behind them. And I thought I had done that. And there's a pond in the back of the property, and I went around the pond, and I saw him in the woods, and I had this big grin on my face, and I'm slowly working my way closer. Just taking my time. Still doesn't seem like he doesn't seem like he knows I'm there. And then I started shooting. And I'm like, man, I swear I hit him. Shot a few more times, and I'm like, I've got to be hitting him. I mean, I get, it's pitch black out, but he's a big guy, and it's like
Right.
not that hard to hit him, And then, I took a few more shots, and nothing's happening. So I started to walk closer to it, and when I got closer, he started standing up. And just for perspective, I'm 6'8", and I was at that time, I was already 6'8" when I was 16. So this, kind of shadowy figure started standing up, and I still think it's my buddy PJ. And all of a sudden, wait a minute, he's almost as tall as I am, and he's still going. And this thing, by the time this thing stands up and starts to turn around, it had me by 2 or 3 feet. And it didn't finish turning around. I was running. I mean, there was just no way I was gone. Because my parents had that property since I was a little kid. We'd never seen anything like that on there. There are no grizzly bears in this part of Ohio or Pennsylvania. There's very few black bears, if any. At any given point, even a black bear is only 6 feet tall to begin with, at most, typically. But, this thing is taller than I was, and it was huge. So as it was turning around, I didn't stick around to take a closer look at it. I took off running. Well, it turns out PJ had the same idea as me and doubled back and thought he had me pinned down, and he was shooting from the other side, probably around the same time I was. Because I came out onto the main trail that he was on, and I stopped to turn around to see if it was following me. And he almost plowed me over because he was.
Now, were you guys making noise? Were you guys making noise when you were shooting at each other, or like?
When I thought it was him, I was laughing when I was shooting.
Right.
I'm sure he was laughing when he was shooting, thinking it was me. But he almost plowed me over, and we looked at each other, and then we looked over, and there's something in the woods that's massive, was kind of walking towards us, and we looked at each other and just. You've never seen us run so fast in our lives, and we weren't interested in sticking out because when we both realized if it's bigger than me, then what could it possibly be? It was just when you see it out in the wild like that. Like I would handle it differently now, especially since I've had an encounter before. I'd probably stick around and try to communicate with it, but
no doubt,
or
at least try to. If he could, at least try to preserve the ground the best you could, because, something that big is going to leave a footprint. So you want to preserve that, and it's not wearing shoes.
Well, we looked for prints the next day. So we ran back. There was a trailer on the property that we were used to sleep in. And so we ran back and we flew in the door and locked it. We checked out the back window. After a few minutes, we looked out the blinds to see if there was anything back there, and there wasn't. And we sat up the rest of the night. We didn't go to bed until the sun came up. And
were you a little nervous to tell your folks? I mean, were your folks living, or your folks there with you sleeping?
Oh yeah, they were. They were already out cold. They're not night people like we were, so they were out cold. My brother was out cold. And we were real hyped up, though. There was no sleeping for us. We're pacing back and forth, talking about it, bouncing ideas. What was it, a bear? Was it this? Was it that? And he's like, no, it couldn't have been. And then it came down to two choices. Either there's a 10-foot guy in a gorilla suit walking around out there, or we just saw a Bigfoot. I mean, there's no alternative option that we've ever been able to come up with in the last 20 some odd years since it happened, almost 30 years now. And he's still my best friend today. We talk about this sometimes, and it's just kind of like you in the moment you think, well, if this happens to me, I'm going to be calm and I'm going to do this. Your instincts kick in so fast, so hard. I don't even remember thinking about anything. You get hyper focused on this thing, and the only thing I could think of was run. And that's all I could feel was run.
Yeah.
And the next day when we woke up, we slowly ventured our way back there, looking around, taking our time. And we looked over the area and we could find the paintballs on the tree. That wasn't hard enough because we didn't hit something with every shot. So there were paintballs on the trees on both sides. We had a pretty good idea of where it was. And we looked around, and at the time it didn't really occur to us to shuffle leaves around and look for prints or look for hair caught on a branch. We were more like, we were interested, is it still out there? Are we going to see it in the distance? Are we going to be able to outrun it this time? did we outrun it? That was the other thing, because at first
did
we're
you
like,
tell
well,
your parents?
we outran it once.
Right.
Eventually,
And
we kept it to
how did they?
ourselves for a long time.
When you told your, well, I'm sure you're, when you told your parents, I mean, how did they react to that? I'm sure I'm sure they understand. It's like a parent knows, they know the difference between when their child is having fun with them and when their child is scared. I mean, if you would have got back to the trailer and your dad would have walked out, he would have looked at you and your friend and realized that there's something really happened to you. It wasn't bullshit. It was like, my son is scared shitless. What happened?
They probably don't really remember because they were sleeping. And I went in there because that was my first thought, was my dad was screwing with us. That seems like right up his alley. You know what I mean? I could
Right.
completely see him doing something like that. And I went in there and he was out cold. And when I looked at his shoes, they hadn't moved. There was nothing on them. There's no mud or dirt or anything. So he wasn't back in the woods. And I asked my mom if he had been out there screwing with us, and she said no. And then I went back and told PJ, well, something was
That would
out
have
there.
yeah, that would have been, that actually probably would have been that probably would have been a big relief to you, knowing that your dad was out there. Oh, dad! But now that you find out that there really was something out there, that
Well,
probably would have just.
and the one fact that remained is it was at least 2 or 3 feet taller than I was.
So you look at like a nine. You
So,
look at
and we
9 feet.
saw it moving in the woods. So it was walking. So at least I think it was closer to 10 personally. PJ's always been closer to 9. I think it was closer to 10. It's hard to say. It happened so fast. It was at night. We were 16. So it's very possible it was 9, could be 10. But I mean, it was enough. Being this tall, it's very rare that I have to look up to someone or something. You know what I mean? You just kind of get used to always looking down, and just going like this. It's just such an awkward feeling when you encounter it, especially when it's so tall that I'm literally tilting my head all the way back to see the top of this thing's head. It's not something you forget. You know what I mean? And
No.
it's astonishing. And we never saw anything before. We never saw anything since, as far as Sasquatch goes or anything like that out there.
But I bet you go out there. Do you still have the property?
It's still in the family, yeah.
I bet you still
I've been
go
out
out
there a
there.
number of times over the
Yeah,
years, and I
yeah,
look around, and now it's different. Now I have a camera with me. I have a
right.
magnifying glass. I have tweezers and bags with me if I found hair that I could pick up. I would potentially, I would string off the area if I found something like a footprint that I would make a molding of it, dig it out. I'd quarantine that whole area up. You know what I mean?
I guess it
But
goes back to the life expectancy. That was many years ago. So it's like, how old was it? At that size, it seemed to me like it would be mature. So it'll probably be a full grown adult. And how long it had been out there before that? I know that once you get something like that in your craw, you're gonna go out there once or twice a year. You're gonna go out there because it's like, did it have a family? Did it have a mate? I mean,
I I suspect that they migrate. Is my
mm,
personal theory, and I think that's part of the reason they remain so elusive. Because over the years, there's the BFRO now, so the Bigfoot Research Organization, Field Research Organization. So they collect sightings, and I've looked on their records, and they have a bunch of sightings from the mid '90s around that time, both on the Pennsylvania side of the line and the Ohio side. And from every now and again, I put something out in Facebook and like the Facebook groups in that area, like even just like the community pages. I joined them all, and I was like, "Did anyone ever see a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot?" And sometimes I'll get very specific. Does anyone ever remember hearing or seeing anything? And people will message me, sometimes privately, which is fine. And they'll say, yeah, I saw something and I didn't think anyone would believe me. And I'll say, well, here's what happened to us. Does this sound familiar? And sometimes
I
people
guess
will
that's
say, yeah,
probably what.
it was huge. And, it was quick, and they'll talk about it. And it's like, because one of the common features that we notice with sightings is that they tend to be seen around or at least near some kind of body of water. There's always a body of water present. Which makes sense because if they're primates, I suspect my personal opinion is they're some form of primate, just like we are. So I would assume they need just as much water, if not more, than we do. I don't know whether they bathe or not. There's discussion on that. Some people say they have a smell. I don't actually have a particularly good sense of smell. What do people think
that they eat? I mean, are they vegetarian? I would think that they were a carnivore. I don't think they're organized, to use utensils. I think maybe they use rock or rocks or something like that, but I don't see them actually, cooking dinner or whatnot.
No, most primates are, for the most part, eat plants, even the larger primates. There are some that will eat meat as well, but for the most part, they'll stick to plants. There have been, I should say, like deer found where the neck has been snapped or the head has been ripped off that have been found in the woods in areas where Sasquatches have been seen. There have been dead animals over the years that have been found. Could be related, could be something different. I wouldn't be surprised. I suspect if they are hungry enough, they'll do what any living creature will do, and they'll eat whatever they have to survive. I do think that part of their ability to stay hidden is they probably do focus more on the plant life because it's not noticeable. It does seem like they have some imperative to stay out of the way. They're curious about us. That's why you see them. But it does seem like they stay out of the way. And take, for example, where my parents' place was. They were surrounded by farmland. Their property had 2 ponds. We were within walking distance to the Ohio River. Lake Erie is, I should say, 25 minutes by car, maybe. And back then, nothing was developed on either side of the state line. The Ohio side has since developed. The Pennsylvania side hasn't changed an inch. In fact, there's less in there now than there was then even. So there's plenty of woods for them to get to Lake Erie. There's the Ohio River right there. There's the farm on the one side is like 600 or 700 acres. I think the one across the street from them is just as big, maybe bigger. There's one sparsel that's next to them that's 10 acres. And then on the other side of them, it's another, several hundred acre farm. The same thing on the street over. The whole street is pretty much one big farm. So there's plenty of crops. There's plenty of food supply. There's plenty of sources of water for them to get to. I suspect what happened, the reason we saw it that night was it was probably passing through on a regular, just kind of routine, because there would be 2-3 months that would go by between visits, or sometimes we'd be out there every weekend. Sometimes we'd stay the week if we didn't have school, but it very well could have been under the impression that no one lived there. It may have thought that there was unlikely it was going to see us because when we weren't there, the grass gets tall. There's no real sign of human presence when we weren't out there, Right. So it probably was just a surprise to see us. I think the paintball guns were weak. So primates tend to have a thicker skin when we do, plus all their hair. So it probably felt more like a mosquito bite to that thing than anything else. So I don't think we were a threat to it because as fast as it seemed to walk, if it wanted to hurt us, it could have. I mean, I have a suspicion that, in fact, it could tell that we were terrified. And I think that's why it stopped. I think it just was curious. But I do think that it was passing through there for a reason. I don't think it was looking to harm anyone. I simply think it was just, it knew there were ponds there. There were fish in the ponds. Maybe it eats fish. I don't know. It could. But I think there's farmland.
Do they migrate as a single, or do you think they migrate as family?
I suspect they travel in multiple ones. And I say that because if you look at the bigger sightings, take Ape Canyon, for example, there were multiple Sasquatches seen once the first one was detected a threat and became threatened by the miners. And when the miners shot one of them, the others went after the body. They wanted it, and then they were all gone. And that seems to be the case in a lot of hot spots, is you see multiple ones, and you get a lot of reportings. I personally think the migration, like I said, I think it's simply they don't want to exhaust a food source. I don't think it's a migration like a bird migrates south for the winter. I don't think the winter is a problem for them. I suspect they've adapted quite well to their environment. I think they migrate in a large geographical area because really they're probably the top of the food chain. We'd like to think it's us, but it's probably them. And
to me, it's interesting that they would actually still stay here in the United States area. You would think with all the people and the noise that they would actually migrate toward, toward Canada. Like it would be more feasible for them to live there and live there in peace. I mean, it's got to be like it's like you hear about cougars all the time in California. Or bears, bears or living in or coyotes. They're living in a human habitat, and they've adapted to that. But I don't think this is not their first choice. They're there because they have to be there. There's really no place for them to go.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just thinking. To me, it's like, do you think that they would have, as I'm sure every time. I'm sure that maybe while they had some wildland during Pennsylvania, Ohio, let's just say for the sake of argument, let's say they migrate from North Dakota down to Mississippi, and then again they go through Ohio. Don't you think that every generation the trail would get smaller and smaller because of the human habitation? And that they would have to make adjustments to the migration paths?
Oh, I'm sure they have over the years. The thing with Ohio is we have a lot of state parks. We have a national parks. We have a national forest, which is several 100,000 acres, which borders multiple state parks, which are tens of thousands of acres. So there's plenty of places for them to go. And in Ohio, just as an example, I know a lot about their patterns here just because I grew up here, so it was just the easiest thing to study. Where I live now in Lorain County, back in the 70s, there were a lot of Sasquatch sightings here. And by the 90s, it was almost non-existent. When I was in high school, where my house is right now, where I'm sitting, this was all farmland. There was nothing here. It's only been in the last 30 years has this area been built up. As it's been built up, the Sasquatch sightings in southern Ohio have increased as Cleveland has expanded. But southern Ohio is all protected land. It's mostly all farmland. There is, like I said, there's the national forest, there's several state parks, there's national parks down that way as well. And then, of course, you have the Ohio River, and then you cross and you're in West Virginia. And there's Parkersburg, West Virginia is not a particularly large city. When you get onto the other side, really anywhere you cross, Wheeling, Parkersburg, it doesn't matter. They're not massive cities. It's still extremely rural, the West Virginia is. Yeah. And it's very mountainous. It's very dense and very thick. But for us, it's kind of a difficult climate. But based on the descriptions and what we believe we understand about these things, it's probably not a difficult climate for them. The steep hills probably don't impact them the same way we are because they're stronger. They have bigger strides. They have bigger feet, bigger hands. If you look at the footprints, there's the size of the foot, more than likely in the middle of their foot, there's an additional joint that we don't possess because our feet are not big enough. That would also help.
Has there been a full-blown cast of a Bigfoot? I mean, a Bigfoot's foot. Has anybody ever recovered one and taken it to?
There's many. Okay. There's many. Typically, what they'll say is that it's certainly a large footprint, but they can't distinguish for sure what it is. It's too big to be human, but they can't, from the casting, they can't tell if it's faked or not. Is really what it comes down to. It appears to be real, but without them actually being on the ground, seeing the footprint, seeing the area, they can't necessarily make 100% guarantee what it in fact originally was, and that's one of the challenges that we've run into over the years is you might find a hair sample, but how long is it good? Is it actually a Sasquatch hair? How do you even know? Right. We're not 100% sure what color they are. We suspect they're brownish, perhaps black in some cases. There's even a few stories of occasional white ones, but for the most part, it's Some people perceive the color as a brown. Some people say they're more towards black. I've heard people say that it was more of a grayish kind of brown or a grayish kind of black. So I don't know whether there's different, just like people, there's different skin tones for them or hair tones, or if we're all seeing the same thing, we're just describing it differently. It's hard to say until we actually get our hands on one of these guys, at least a sample of their DNA, then we can really get down and see what's going on. And that's one of the challenges. And that's why it's still referred to as a pseudoscience, as you mentioned earlier, because it's, even if you find a hair sample, where are you going to get it tested?
Right.
In the scientific community.
You mentioned the Bigfoot organization, and to me, are you part of that organization?
I am not. No.
I was going to say, what the smartest thing they could do for that organization is to go out there and recruit some scientists to listen, we know that, people are skeptical. We understand that. This is our way of telling you that not only do we believe it, but we want to verify everything that we find. We want to verify. Look, people might not believe me, but if some doctor or renowned, some scientist comes on there and is sitting on there going like, yeah, let's go take a look at this. That gives it a lot of credibility. I think part of the plan to suppress information like this on cryptids is that, I think people, they really want to believe. They really want to believe. And the thing is, when they start talking, and then when people start hearing them, and the first reaction is always, it's always laughter. But I don't necessarily think that that's just I don't think that's just a natural reaction. I think it's sort of like a programmed reaction. It's like, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna say Bigfoot's around, and then people get used to seeing it without taking it seriously. And again, it's like to me, it's like, okay, you're doing everything right. As far as the pseudoscience goes, like, I don't understand that term, because it's like, if you're doing everything right in terms of collecting a new species or collecting a sample of hair or fecal matter or footprint, I mean, to me, you're doing everything what a normal scientific team would do. And I mentioned before you got here, we're still discovering creatures even now. There's a new insect in Australia. It's as big as your arm. It's like this big. They just now discovered it. It's the heaviest insect on the planet. They discovered a new shark species down in some caves. They'd never seen it before. And to me, it's like, until it gets identified, in a sense, it's a cryptid. It's unknown.
That's exactly what they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's 100% what they are.
And so, just because I don't have a footprint doesn't make it any less true that he's out there, any less than you discovered a new shark. Because yesterday you would have been telling me I was full of shit because you haven't seen it yet. But now you've seen it. Now it's like, okay, well, there are people who have seen a Sasquatch. They have seen a sighting of that, or a Yeti, or who knows? I don't know with a Wendigo. I know a Wendigo is a magical creature, but still, to me, it's like, I'm sure a Bigfoot, a Sasquatch is not just, it's not, their homeland is not just North America. I'm sure.
No, not at all.
Every region has their version of the story of Sasquatches, but there's a reason for that, because all stories have to start somewhere. All sightings have to start somewhere, and that's where they start at. The Yeti in Asia, the Wendigo in Canada, South America. I'm sure they have their version of this. Names,
yeah.
It's just ignorant to believe that that there isn't because no one knows for 100% that there isn't a true life Sasquatch. Just like there was, you and I were talking about the Loch Ness monster. Perfect example for that. And the one thing I mentioned too is the fact that it seems like in the 70s, this was massive. There was so much curiosity for the Loch Ness monster, for the Sasquatch, for the Bigfoot, right? So much interest. And you would think with the technology that we have today, that would expand. That would just make it huge. You have shows like the X-Files, which I mentioned before you got here. That did a lot to raise the awareness of cryptids, even though it came through a TV show. They say every legend is based on fact. That's where every legend comes from a truth somewhere. And I just feel like now here we are, 2025, and it feels like we actually have less information when we should have more. And I don't think we have less on purpose. I mean, I don't think we have less by accident. I think it's on purpose. I really like to know what was in the Loch Ness. I feel to the point now where it's like, how did it go? I mean, it went from sightings, different people had different sightings and pictures. We proved that was a hoax. Proved by who? By whose standard? Hasn't been disproved to me. I haven't seen anything, and I mean, think about the sophistication it would take back then when they took their pictures. Think about the sophistication it would take to doctor up a picture like that. I mean, do you really think the average Joe Scottish, is sitting there, coming up with an idea on how to make a fake picture? No, I don't think that would be within their realm to do that. I'm just curious what the satellites there are. We have satellites. What if Nessie did live there and she died? And which is probably what has probably happened, because there has not been a live sighting for a very, very long time. But what if they did? What if they found her skeleton in there? When they find dinosaur bones all the damn time, all the time. What if they found Nessie's bones in the Loch Ness and they took it? Same thing like with Mount St. Helen.
Well, I mean, the stuff has disappeared to the Smithsonian over the years, and it gets recorded being checked in, and then they claim they don't have it, and no one knows anything about it 10 years later. And there's plenty of examples of those to go through. But yeah, I mean, it's. I guess you can never rule out the possibility that someone faked it. I think it's unlikely. I don't see how you could get away with it. And I agree with the old picture of Nessie. I don't know how you fake that at that time. The technology is not the same. That's one of the big issues we run into now. Is somebody will say, "Well, I have a picture of it," and then you really have to look at it and be like, "Okay, is this a legitimate picture, or did somebody generate this on AI?"
AI. To me, that's what really is gonna. It definitely is gonna put, cryptology really behind the 8 ball now. Now that their AI is out there, it's just gonna help bury it.
It puts us, it backs us into a little bit of a corner, but we're used to it. That's okay. And here's the thing too: is it was very taboo in the scientific community, and it still is to some degree, especially depending on what kind of work and where you work, to admit that you believe in Bigfoot or you follow the Bigfoot community. Because I've met people at different conventions and things like that, and they'll say, "Oh, I work in such and such lab. I'd love to get your card and reach out to you sometime if I have anything. I have some questions," and they're kind of like, "I'd really rather you didn't. I don't want anyone to ever find out that I was here. That's why I'm in Ohio and I'm from New York," kind of thing, because I don't want to take the chance of running into someone that might recognize me and it gets back to my employer, because then I'll be the laughing stock of the lab. And that's a real fear.
Yeah.
And I get that, we were all very curious, but they also have careers that they worked hard for, and they don't want to lose them over a maybe, or even a guarantee for that matter. But so that's part of one of the obstacles. I think it is getting better. There are more people openly kind of coming to conventions. Occasionally we meet people in the social media groups, and it turns out that they actually have some kind of scientific background, or they have a biology degree, or they work in some kind of lab environment, which is always nice because then you can pick their brain about questions and things like that, anatomy questions, and just things that we wouldn't necessarily have the answer to. We would need someone specific. I mean, even zoologists, someone who's that familiar, or someone who studies primates. There's so many questions I'd love to ask some of these people, but it's very hard to, like, if you try to call a college and then you leave a message that I'm such and such with Cryptid Paranormal, I generally don't hear back. It's just what it is. And I get it.
Well,
like, they're crazy. That's okay. You're entitled. They're entitled to their opinion, and we've got ours.
I mean, well, look at the paranormal, right? Paranormal, no one took it seriously, right? No, nobody did until Duke University started their paranormal program. And the government started testing. They started running to see if they could find psychics for the Vietnam War. So they were running the tests for those, and then and like I said, Duke started their own paranormal department. Duke University, one of the top universities in the whole world. As far as I know, I'm not sure, but as far as I know, I still think they still have some fingers into that. I'm not sure if the department's still there or not. But I do know
offhand, but I know that they were involved at one point. But the government's we're trying to work with remote viewers since the 50s. And it's strange because if you have an active sighting, whether it's a paranormal thing, by paranormal kind of encompasses everything, cryptids in a way sometimes too. But if it's a high enough visible site, somehow for whatever reason the government always seems to show up, and there's always some safety concern of why you can't pursue any further. You know what I mean?
Right.
And just like when the Roswell balloon crashed, of course, I'm sure it was a weather balloon. Then if it was a weather balloon, then why all the secrecy? Why did you have armed guards surrounding this massive area of desert to get a water balloon or a weather balloon out? What possible intelligence could an American citizen leak from seeing a weather balloon? Why does it? If you've seen the pictures when it was paraded out of Roswell, they tried to do it at night. And there's people on the street. There's armed guards all around this thing. And there's vehicles, and they got guns pointing at people for a weather balloon. Seems a little odd, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then take, for example, the Flatwoods Monster out of West Virginia. It's technically considered a cryptid, although it's really more of an alien. There was a family that was outside. The kids were playing at a nearby school with some friends. They saw a big light in the sky. Something crashed on a neighbor's field. And when the mother and a friend of hers in the National Guard and the boys went over to investigate, it appeared to them to be a ship. Something came out of it that looked somewhat reptilian, and then it took off. And then you had a little bit of sightings here for a few weeks, but by the next afternoon, the federal government had taken over the farm. The school was shut down, that the city was basically barricaded in, and it was a meteor or a fallen satellite, whatever excuse they were. They were going back and forth, the different excuses. As well, okay, so let's say it was. Then how come the military hung around for 2 months? What could they possibly be looking? You know what I mean? What are they going to get from a satellite? And all of a sudden one day the sightings of this creature stops, and then the military's all of a sudden gone.
They caught whatever they were looking for.
Yeah, they accomplished whatever their goal was. If it was to get whatever crash landed there out, if it really was a ship, if it was some kind of stealth plane, or the pilot was in some kind of unusual suit for some reason. I mean, I'm more than willing to hear any theory. However, I just don't see why they would stay around for so long. And if you've ever read John Keel's book, The Mothman Prophecies, he talks about the Men in Black. And just kind of like what you were saying, where a narrative is being spun for us to believe, and those movies came out, and they kind of make a joke out of it.
Right.
But those guys have been cited for 75 years now. Probably longer than that, maybe even 100 years back. It's just what the ones we know of. And when the Flatwoods Monster incident occurred, there were people in black suits driving a black unmarked car, claiming to be from the government, that were talking to witnesses. They were talking to townspeople, and then they were just gone one day. And the same thing happened in West Virginia with the Mothman incident in the 60s. And there's articles in the newspaper. If you go to the Mothman Museum in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, fantastic place. But the guy who runs it has the old Nose People articles, and they talk about these weird guys in black suits that were walking around that were just would say that they were with the government, but they wouldn't tell you what branch. They wouldn't acknowledge if they were military or civilian. They asked questions. They didn't answer questions, and then they moved on, and they were there 1 second and gone the next. And there's stories that go back to that from Roswell. There's stories from that from when the Phoenix Lights happened. Every time it seems like these guys tend to turn up. And in the Mothman prophecies, John Keel talks about associates of his where weird occurrences happened. There was a guy who showed up at a lady's house, claimed that he knew him, John Keel, and he, the lady invited him in. She was talking to him, and he, seemed like he was hungry. And she said, I don't have anything but Jell-O. And he said, oh, sure. Well, he tried to drink the Jell-O out of the bowl. And that was not the first red flag, but that was the indicator that there was something was wrong, because the way the witness described it, who had the encounter with this alleged Air Force officer who no one ever found or ever saw again, he acted like, according to the statement, he acted like he had never seen Jell-O, he had never seen a bowl, and he tried to drink, and she literally had to teach him how to use a knife and a fork. So there definitely seems to be a weird element out there that, whether it's connected to the government or not, my guess is it probably is. I agree with you. Circling back to earlier, I think there's a lot they're not telling us. I don't know why they're not telling us. I have all sorts of speculations under the sun where I could venture to guess why.
Yeah, I could guess why too. I mean, just think of this. What really blows people's minds. Like, why don't they ever tell us anything like this? Why don't they? Well, think about this. If someone told you that there's space flight, right? And and the ships come down and they have finite amount of passengers, could you imagine what would happen if a species came down here and wanted to take?
I know exactly.
The worldwide would be chaos, mass chaos.
100%. Well, interestingly enough, Men in Black, great movie, by the way, but Will Smith's character has I'm not sure what the exact lineage is, but it's one of my favorite things in that entire movie. When he says to Agent K, why don't you tell people? People are smart. They can handle the truth. And he said, no, people are stupid, reckless, dangerous, and they act out of fear. An individual is smart. An individual can understand. But when you get people together, we act crazy. And that's a very solid point. If you took one by one a small group of people, 4 or 5 people, and said, here's what's going on, don't tell anybody, which obviously that would never work. We all played telephone in kindergarten. That story's getting around there, and it'll be worse than ever. But the point was, how would we react? What would have happened if they said, okay, it was an alien ship. We've got 4 alien bodies, 2 dead, 1 dying, 1 alive at Area 51, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. The world would have lost their minds. They would have gone crazy. And look what would happen now. It's even worse, because with social media, with the internet, with information being a split second away from it happening to where it's posted for the world to see, if somebody gets their detail wrong or somebody misquotes or says, oh, they could be dangerous, but we're still doing an analysis, and somebody takes they could be out and just says, well, this guy said they're dangerous, and here it's all over the place. You can watch the video for yourself. That would start.
Do you remember 15 years ago or maybe 20 years ago when we had the power outage on the East Coast?
Oh, I sure do. 2003.
You imagine that's exactly what would happen if something like that happening now.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. it would just be instantaneous blackout. It would just be
Yeah, I
like,
mean, yeah, it would be insane. The power grid would probably fail because no one would go to work. People would be racing out of the major cities, trampling each other. They would raid grocery stores. I mean, look what happened during the pandemic with toilet paper for whatever reason. I've never understood why people were so obsessed with toilet paper. There's much more
I couldn't
higher
understand
priorities
that
on my
either.
list, but
I didn't understand that either. Everybody was running for toilet paper. It's like, I don't get it. Why? It's not. It has nothing to do with you going poop in the toilet. Oh my
yeah,
God, I gotta get the toilet paper. But you know what it was? It was what was that? FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. So what happens is that, people get told. They get told what to believe. They get told that there's shortages on toilet paper. People are going to the store to get it. Okay, I
yeah.
better do the same thing, and then you get the mob mentality. Um,
And that's exactly what happens is the mob mentality kicks in and then everybody goes crazy, which is what would happen if the wrong information is presented in the wrong fashion in the wrong timeline.
so you think that's the reason why, right? Governments, I'm sure there's even stuff that I'm sure there's
Well,
like every country has their secrets that they share with other countries, but not all the time. There's stuff that we don't share among our top allies. I think this is something something along that line. I don't think that other countries share any sort of a cryptid. I don't think they exchange information on cryptids.
probably not. They may. I don't know. I don't think it's for the protection of the population. I think they
No,
do it to stay in power because whoever has the secrets, whoever has the knowledge, can weaponize information, has the power. But let's be honest. I mean, I don't know who's running this country the last 20 years, but it's no one we've elected is really actually doing anything on either side of the political aisle. Someone's pulling all the strings, and it's no one that ever steps out in front of a podium. I can tell you that.
oh, that's always
And
been, and president's
you
always
know what I
been a
mean.
figurehead.
So there's always some behind the scenes, in my opinion, kind of element out there that's pulling all the strings. And I think that if there is something out there that gives them a very powerful advantage. For example, I've always wondered, how did we go from horse and buggy to the first car? And then within 100 years of the first car, now that we have ones that drive themselves around town. But we spent thousands of
Yeah.
years
I
with
mean,
horse and buggy. So how did we all of a sudden make these massive technological jumps? Because if you remember, pre-Roswell, interestingly enough, a computer would take up an entire room, and not a small room either. And it's
no.
now that's an iPhone or an Android can do more than that computer could, and it fits in the palm of your hand.
Yeah.
So how did we get this far this fast? I mean, especially if you look at the last 25 years when cell phones really took off, and now all of a sudden we're all walking around with computers. Now everyone has a Ring camera on their house, so we live in a surveillance state, unfortunately, because everyone's got cameras everywhere, and it's all Wi-Fi, so it all goes onto the internet, so it can be up for grabs for anyone. But my question is, how did this technology evolve so fast when it took us 10,000 years, 50,000 years to get past horse onto an automobile, and then in 100 years they're driving themselves around? I mean, it just seems like that something happened that gave us a massive technological boost. And
And
if that's it,
yeah, I'm just curious. Like to me, it's like I'm just curious. Like I said, I do think it's I think a lot of sightings are suppressed. Um, but what is the average person that because there's two types of investigators when it comes down to these sort of things. You got your weekend warriors type that go out there maybe once a year, twice a year, go out there for a couple, then they rush back and put it on YouTube. And of course, they always find something too. Then you got your dedicated ones that they take it seriously. They have invested time and effort and study, such as yourself, into the realm of a cryptid and paranormal. I'm sure we haven't talked about that part of it yet. But I knew we'd be talking a lot about cryptids because I'm fascinated. Um, how hard is it for? Because even though you welcome other people to to come and join. Like your group has over 18,000 people in it. Your Facebook group has 18,500 people. I don't know if 100% of them are all cryptids, cryptologists or fans of it, but still, you have 18,500 people that are at least interested in one of the two, cryptids or paranormal. What is more popular too? Is I would think the paranormal is more popular than cryptids. Is that the case?
It seems like more people are interested in the ghosts and things like that. It's also a lot easier because, first of
Yeah.
all, for the most part, it's indoors, right? Depending on where you live, it's either cold or hot half the year, and there's only a little bit of time in between. So it's just easier. It's a little bit cheaper because with cryptids, the only way to really to go out and look, you actually kind of have to get out in the woods, and you have to go spend a few nights out there, sometimes by yourself. And you got to put trail cameras up. You've got to be sitting up all nights. Be patient. You've got to look for signs. It's a very methodical process. It's a very extensive process. If you're trying to follow any kind of scientific methodology behind it, you don't want to contaminate your own evidence. So you really have to be out there and be careful what you're doing. And it's just such a more hassle. Whereas for ghost hunting, you can say, I want to go ghost hunting, book a haunted house somewhere or a haunted museum or a haunted temple, do it overnight. It's $150.
Yeah.
You stay all here all night.
I can't. Yeah, I can't. I can't go with that. To me, that's just paranormal encounter is just as much as serious as a cryptid encounter. It's like I think that again, it's something that is so watered down now. It's beyond belief. It's like you turn onto a paranormal channel or what have you, and they're going ghost hunter, and they always find something, right?
Yeah,
I go looking for Bigfoot. I know the chances of me finding something for the Bigfoot are probably between 1 to 1,000, But good Lord, I could go out with you tomorrow, and I guarantee you, we could come back in a week and put up a YouTube video saying we had a paranormal encounter, which you think it would be absolutely so much more harder than doing a cryptid search, and I think people really they do damage to it, to the paranormal community by taking advantage of people. It's like those so-called mediums. They come up there and they say, "Oh, your grandma died, right? Your grandma." Yeah, because you asked me that out there in the front. That's why. You had one of the people there with a little earphone in your ear. Yeah, Joe Smith. He just lost his grandma. They do damage to it by taking advantage of people's beliefs. And to me, it's like you're not that far away from the most holy ground in this country anyway. I've had a couple of paranormal events, and I'll tell you one thing. I'll go to my grave with this, but I think the most hollow ground in this country is Gettysburg.
Interesting.
I went out there to where Pickett's charge was, where he kicked off. My wife was in the car, and I'm standing out there, and I didn't even hear her call my name. She said she called my name like 3 times. And then she came up to me and she tapped me on the shoulder, and I was standing there just watching. I had tears coming down my eyes. I wasn't crying, but I had tears coming down my eyes because I could see the battle in front of me. I could see individual cavalrymen and horses. I could hear the cannon fire. I could see that as much as I'm talking to you right now. I saw that at Gettysburg. It's just it was so mind blowing to me. It's like, wow, this is amazing, to see this. And I believe that. Like I said, I'll believe that till I take my last breath. But that's hollow ground. But it doesn't make me happy when I see people charging through there, and then they're okay, I'm talking to a soldier. I'm talking to, we're gonna make contact. We make contact, and goddamn well that they haven't done that. They're exploiting it when they don't have to. If they just went out there with an open mind and open heart, I do believe that you would run across some real paranormal activity. I mean, what was your first encounter? Have you had any paranormal encounters, or is it just an
I
interest in?
I well, a little both actually, but yeah. So when I was in school, I went to Columbus State in Columbus, Ohio, and I was going to class one day, and I saw this lady in a red dress, very pretty, and I was on my way, and my math class was on the top floor on the left hand side. I can still remember walking up the steps, and I saw her ahead, and then she was in the hall. And I was like, well, she was in a weird dress, like it seemed like an 1800s style dress. And I was like, I don't know, maybe there's a Renaissance fair or Renaissance club or something I'm not aware of. So like either way, I want to go talk to her. So I started walking down the hallway, and I looked into the math class to see, typically I was running late, especially the math at that time. And, there's nobody really in there yet. So I looked over and she was gone. And they go, she must have ducked into one of the rooms. Got to the end of the hallway. I looked in all the rooms and there's nobody in there. This guy comes up from the other side, the other staircase, and asked if I saw where the girl in the red went. And I'm assuming she went that way because she's not in any of the rooms. I looked. Like, how did you see her anyways? And he's like, well, she was up the stairs ahead of me. I'm like, there's nowhere she couldn't have been unless she walked down and walked back up. But I just turned my head for a second. She couldn't have moved that fast. Thought it was weird. Didn't think anything of it. Like, this is really weird. I wonder where she went, And
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know. Maybe there's a closet or something she's changing in. Who knows? Any event, a couple months go by. I got a job working for the school. And one of my responsibilities was giving campus tours. So you go to the training thing, they're walking around. We get to Aquinas Hall, and they start talking about the lady in red who's haunted the hall for the last however many years. I was sitting there like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. And I was asking questions. I go, what does she look like? And they described exactly what I saw, according to people who have reported encounters over the years. And apparently the campus police were aware of it. They didn't like to mess around with the hall that much because it freaked them out a little bit because they'd seen her looking out the window. A friend of mine, her dad was visiting, and she said, he was kind of staring out talking, and she walked over and she said, Dad, who are you talking to? And he said, the pretty lady in the dress right here. And he looked over and he said, she was just right here. And he described the lady in red that supposedly has walked that hall for as long as it's been there, as far as I know. And people over the years have reported seeing her out the window. People see her in the hallway. Sometimes she's in the courtyard of the building. So it's interesting because it makes sense how she disappeared, because it always boggled my mind how she got off that floor without one of us seeing her or moving that fast, because I just looked in the room for a second. So there's no way she could have gotten down to the other end of the hall and out of a staircase. It just never made sense to me, but at the time I was like, well, I just didn't think of it in that frame. Like, oh, I wonder. And then I started hearing all these stories, and they start talking to other people that worked there who had seen her. And it's kind of like, this is fascinating. And then I found out when I went to the library to do research that there used to be a graveyard, of course, there. Supposedly it was moved. Let me rephrase, the headstones were moved. Supposedly the bodies were moved too, but who knows for sure? Who knows how they were treated? There could be any number of reasons, or it could be completely unrelated. There was an article 4 or 5 years ago now, maybe, in the Columbus Dispatch about the school, the hauntings at the school, because it had resurfaced again in recent years. There were a lot more sightings, and they're being reported more. And a lady wrote an article on it. It was really, really interesting. And she talked about how the graveyard was there, and it was, supposedly all moved over to the new cemetery, that's still there today. And, you always have to wonder when they say we're relocating the graveyard, are they actually moving the bodies, or are they moving the headstones? And even if you are moving the bodies, what impact does that have, if at all? Because that may not have been necessarily the cause, or you know what I mean. There's all sorts of different theories of why something would haunt a location or something
That's
would be present.
that's one thing that does get me about. I mean, there's two different thoughts for paranormal. I mean, there's the people who believe that there are. I mean, I can't explain. I just got done explaining about Gettysburg or thing when I thought Gettysburg, but there's also the other the you know, my first encounter with the paranormal when I was 12 years old, and I had an encounter with a poltergeist because I was open to it, and so it was very spooky. Um, but it always kills me when I see a lot of investigators. I'm not sure how you feel about this or not, and if you feel the same way, I mean no disrespect, but this is just how I look at it. What really kills me about paranormal investigators, and it's like I think it hurts, is the fact that they always seem to limit what the poltergeist can do, or the entity can do. They always seem to believe that it has rules. They're dead. There's no more rules. They can go wherever the hell they want. They're a spirit. It's not they're not tied down to a house. You know what I'm saying? It's like, well, they're haunted the house because they can't leave here. And who's holding them there? I mean, certainly it's not me, you know. Certainly not anybody I know. Not going to be any priest that I know. They can go to go anywhere they want, like sitting there watching, you know, watching the the battle, of Gettysburg, and you're sitting there, and all you see is these horses and these men, and you can hear the cannon, and they weren't locked into that place. They were going over. I mean, I'm looking from the width that I saw while I'm standing there at Pickett's kickoff, where he kicked off his attack. Brian, it's like miles wide. It's wide. There's no. It's like it's not just here because this is where they fought at. It's wide. The possibilities are endless. I just feel sometimes when some investigators they try to put limitations, on that person. Like that person's here because they're tied here. Who's to say? Maybe they like it where they're at. Maybe when you're not. I mean, there's like. Do you see the entity every day? No. Well, that might be because today the person went to Alaska, and then they might be back the next day. Who's to say?
Well, and that's assuming that's assuming they're dead people and not something else entirely. I agree. I think it's a bad judgment to assume anything. We have to go with what we can verify. And that's part of the reason that we're still called a pseudoscience, is because everybody goes out and they say, well, I think this and I think this, and because of these rules. But where do these rules come from? Who says?
Yeah.
And, and like you were saying, I agree with you. And are you familiar with Ed and Lorraine Warren at all?
Yeah, I was just going to mention them I was just going to mention the last Conjuring movies coming up.
Well, if you look at some of the stuff, I mean, they equate pretty much everything to the demonic. I disagree, but that's they investigated over.
I do tend toward a poltergeist is a poltergeist is a demonic spirit. I do believe that. I don't believe the ghost people coming back as ghosts. I guess you can call me like a Christian type person, and that believes like once dead then the judgment. I'm one of those type of guys. But I can't explain what I saw. Was I open to it when I saw the at Gettysburg? Because I've never seen anything like that before nor since. I've never seen that. Not even. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's hard to say why some people see things and others don't. I like to consider myself half skeptical. I always try to find another explanation for what I've seen. I want to explain it. I don't care what the explanation is. I just want to know what it is. And if there's a trick of light, if there's another problem, if there's something else that's deceiving, I would like to know. So I try to rule everything out first. But That is one school of thought, is that everything is demonic and not necessarily deceased humans. There's all sorts of different theories. There's if you go down the quantum side of things and the physics side, that they would tell you, a physicist would say it's bleed over from a dimension existing in the same time space on a different, I guess, frequency, for lack of a better word, or it's a dimension next to us that overlaps, it's bleeding over. And we're seeing just a glimpse of someone just going about their day completely unaware that we're even there. And it has nothing to do with us whatsoever. It's just one of those things. There's other people like, Ed and Lorraine Warren contribute most things to demonic. I disagree. I don't think everything is demonic. That said, they did do over 10,000 cases in their career, and they were called in by not only the U.S. government, but several other governments across the world to investigate things that nobody else could figure out. So they certainly have the background to make a statement saying that it's probably this. They would know probably more than anybody because of how many cases and the kind of people that recruited them. If they weren't getting results, if they weren't explaining things, those kinds of organizations probably would not have taken them, hired them, brought them on, and asked them to consult for them and things like that. But some people think
again, it's one of those things too, if you think about it though, right? So again, it goes back to where, now you got people doing investigations. You said they got called to 10,000 cases. I'd like to know how many of those cases did they actually run into an entity? Because if they say they ran into 10,000 entity cases, I would have to sit there and I would question that. No, it's not because it's going to pop up just because we're the Warrens. You and I could go out there tomorrow and all of a sudden become Ghostbusters. I mean, we could have the same. We could do the same thing they did because we know just what they know. We know what they know. I mean, there's not that much difference between with the knowledge that they had versus knowledge that most people have. It's that they were probably more biblically based.
They were. They were definitely both very Christian oriented. However, Ed Warren was very big on ruling out ghosts or demonic activity early on. There are a lot of the things that we would do today came from them. It occurred to him that an object might be moving because of the air pressure in a house.
Right.
He thought about things like that. So they would try to explain things before, and sometimes they could, and sometimes they couldn't. It doesn't necessarily mean it was spiritual or demonic or anything like that. They just simply didn't have a rational explanation for it either. But
right.
not every investigation did they run into things. But exactly. There are a lot that they did. But if you look at the number of cases that they were doing, I mean, they were doing this for a living every day. They went to work, and this is what they did. They went and checked out, investigated here, investigated there, and people called them in. And that's the other thing, too, why their cases have a higher encounter rate than a typical investigator. It's just the sheer number that they did. And they were really one of a kind at the time, and they were world renowned. So people, if you had an actual serious, if you thought your house was haunted and you saw a ghost and it wasn't really bothering you, because I talk to people who have that situation all the time, and they'll say, oh, my ghost doesn't bother me that much. I just leave it alone. It leaves me alone. They've never called in a paranormal investigator, right? Something bad enough to happen for you to call in someone, to fly someone across the country, to put them up in a hotel and cover their expenses to come to your house and spend time there and try to figure out what is going on because you're so terrified. Something must have really happened to put people in that position to reach out to them like that. So I think that's one of the reasons why their encounter rate was higher. And again, just sheer numbers. It was over 10,000 cases. I'm not sure if anyone even knows what the exact number is, but I mean, that's amazing how many things that they experienced over the years. But again, they debunked a lot of things. They said, no, that's not a ghost, or that's not a demon, or that's not supernatural. It's not paranormal. There's a lot of times where they would say, no, I don't think this is. I think it's something else. And sometimes they would get to the root cause. Sometimes they would. It doesn't mean it's paranormal, or at least there's no evidence at that time to support that theory. So then they would move on, And,
well, what do you think about today's? What do you think about today's investigators, though? I mean, this is the like ghost hunters. You see those shows on TV. I just think yeah. Yeah.
I think they're exactly what they're meant to be, entertainment. They're going to find something no matter what. No matter what, they're always going to find something. And unfortunately, I wish that were true, but the truth is that 9 times out of 10, when you go out, you find nothing.
Yeah.
You know, I stayed in plenty of haunted places and never seen a thing, never heard a thing, never felt a thing, never seen a thing. Seen a couple strange things over the years, but for the most part, when you go out, you put cameras, you might catch something a little off. Maybe it can be explained, maybe it can't. Doesn't mean it's a ghost. Just means I don't have the right explanation for it. It's not supernatural, not paranormal. It's just, I don't know. Maybe there's a problem with the SD card. Maybe the film got slightly exposed. Who knows what would happen to a picture to not turn out? You know what I mean? Things like that can be explained away. Maybe you're seeing a reflection of a light off.
What about the equipment a lot of these folks use? I mean, is it really legitimate equipment, or is it a lot of it just bells and okay, you already answered that question. Or a lot of it just bells and whistles?
I go back and forth on it. For example, I have EMF meters, K2 meters. I've seen them light up. I've seen them do things that don't necessarily make sense to me. My biggest problem with an EMF meter is if I hold it close enough to the wrong wall and there's a light switch on that wall, I'm going to get a reaction too. And there's different theories behind that. If a supernatural being is energy, right? Energy is energy. Doesn't matter what's creating it. It gives off some kind of a signal in theory. Any kind of energy would. So maybe they do pick up ghosts. I don't really know what the answer to that is. I'm very skeptical of that just because when you walk around with a K2 meter, I go to certain parts of my house and get to do all sorts of stuff if I'm standing in the right spot because I know where the wiring is. You know what I mean? That's going through the wall or going through the ceiling or the conduit in the floor. I was in Kansas City a few weeks ago and there were some things going off. And when we talked to one of the stewards of the building, he said, "Oh, there's a massive power line that runs under this floor." I was like, "Okay, well then, I wouldn't trust a K2 reading where there's a power line or there's what do you call it, like a secondary panel in the same room, and then we're picking up electrical readings." Well, I expect to pick up electrical readings in a room where there's a panel. You know what I mean?
Right.
Now, if it's different, if it's a cabin in the middle of the woods and it's off the grid and there's no power there, all of a sudden it starts spiking. Then I don't know. I can't explain that. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes people do go to places where there's no power, at least there's not supposed to be. And the equipment does go off. But again, you're talking EMF also picks up radio signals because I've seen that happen, like a PEM box, or a spirit box, some people call it. I've seen investigators on different group outings and they swear by these things. I was on Blessedhurst Island in Parkersburg investigating. Two of the teams had PEM boxes, both of them. And they're talking in, and I was in the hallway between the rooms, and I hear one box talking, and I hear whispering out of the other. Then I hear them talk back, and I hear whispering out of that box because the signals were crossed. You know what I mean? And then it ended up being they were picking up. It was Parkersburg's homecoming weekend, and my Mel meter was picking up CB traffic from the boats, so it was pointless to you know what I'm saying. Though, are there explanations? Sure. Is that always the explanation? Not necessarily. Yeah. It's hard. It's certainly a good resource to have. I think it's worth noting. Anything is worth documenting. Every detail matters because if you do enough investigations and the ones where you actually have activity, where you actually say, okay, I can't explain that. When you set those all together and you're looking at basically like somebody dumped out a puzzle box, then you've got to put everything back together. Every little detail helps you tell where that piece fits in. And that's really what matters. Did you feel weird?
I definitely can respect you for that. I mean, I do. I do. I think it's, to me, it's like, I just think it does such a disservice to everybody else when you do get people out there that are, trying to exploit people for money or fame or likes or what have you. And it's like, look, there's nothing wrong with going out there and taking your gadgets out there and doing
No, not at
a
all.
proper investigation. And if you find nothing, you find nothing. There's nothing wrong with that. There's it's like, look, like cryptid hunters. Look, it's just like I know that if I go out looking for a Bigfoot in Ohio, my chances are probably going to be like 1 in 100. And there's nothing wrong with coming back there and saying, nope, I didn't see it this time, because you don't know what's going to happen the next time, and you want to be
No.
ready for that. But I think when people go ahead and they pound it, like, yeah, I saw a Bigfoot, and they saw that, like, well, gosh, that's like your eighth sighting. You must have got something
Yeah.
by now, right? You must have got some proof by now. I mean, because you're a veteran at this. You know where they're at. You know where they're going to. So let's go get a foot casting. Let's go get some fur. Let's go. And all you've done is you just wasted everybody's time by just, I don't know, by wasting everybody's time. I do think it's a serious subject, and I do think that cryptology should be taken more serious. I mean, I do.
I agree. Cryptozoology, parapsychology should both be taken significantly more serious than they are. And part of the reason they're not is because we do get people who exaggerate. Like, you have ghost hunters where everyone jumps if there's a sound or if a shadow moves, and it's like, well, okay, so let's break that down frame by frame. How many people are actually there? We see 2 people on camera, so what does that mean? There's 5 to 7 behind the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Are we seeing their shadows? Is the sound we're hearing that they knocked over a coffee can? Did they drop a lighter? I mean, are they picking stuff up? Sure, maybe. I mean, even a blind squirrel finds a nut sometime. But I think that these shows are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. They're there to get you to think. They entertain, and I'm sure they turn a lot of people into the field, which is great, because we always need more fresh eyes and more perspectives and more ideas, because there's always something we haven't thought of. But you just have to look at it and say, I realize that they could get lucky one day, but more than likely this is just an exaggerated show. And I don't want to say it's bullshit, but it's probably
it's
probably
funny.
less true than it's. Yeah.
I remember seeing, there's a movie I saw, and it cracked me up. And it's this movie called The Dead Room. It's a really good movie, and it's about this this house that supposedly got haunted, and the family left everything. I mean, they just ran. I mean, their house was a mess. Their insurance company thought so much of their clients that they hired this team to go in there and investigate it. So they go in there and they set up all their equipment. That's what they're doing. They have a psychic with them, and they have 2 tech guys with them, and that's their goal. Is that's what their job is, to detect abnormalities, entities. And it made me laugh. It's like the first time that they actually had a true encounter, they all wanted to go home. It's just like, I'm sitting there watching this going like, why the hell would you spend all that time studying and researching and setting up equipment and going out on these investigations, and the first time something really does happen, you're out of there? To me, it's like, that's the opposite. You're not going away from it, you're going toward it, because this is what you live for. If you and I were in a house, and there was a bump a bump upstairs, and we're looking for Sasquatch, I don't think you and I were going to be sitting there going like, oh yeah, it's great, let's get the hell out of here. I think we're going to go out there and set up a perimeter and bring our ultraviolets, and we're gonna wait for that son of a bitch to come down. I want to see it. I went. I'm a cryptologist. Okay, bump. Well, I was a cryptologist. See, it's like, no, you want this is what you live for. I'm sure you run that through your mind many times when you're out on your investigations, where It's like, you play in your head, like, what do I do? How do I do it? What steps do I
Oh
take?
yeah.
I'm sure you're very, very ready for an encounter with a Sasquatch. I think
Just
that's I think that
cameras. I mean, even my phone camera's on. Just recording randomness because I have night vision goggles that can record that I'll wear sometimes too that record video. My next investment's going to be in a body cam. As strange as that sounds, but when you're looking around and you turn your head, anything could be happening, and on the other side, when you're looking left, something could be happening right.
you know
Or if you're something right in front of you. So, I mean, part of it essentially is wiring yourself up with cameras facing all four directions, unfortunately, and then just spending hours going through all the footage, trying to make sure you didn't miss anything. But even just recording where you're looking, because if you go back sometimes and you look at footage of something you recorded, you may see something you didn't see before. Just
right.
simply overlooked it. And it's different when you can slow down the frame and go frame by frame, or you can freeze it, zoom in, and stare at it. You may realize there was something there. You may not be able to identify it, but it may seem out of place. Because when it comes
You
to
mentioned.
cryptids, when it comes to
Go ahead.
cryptids, that's what you're looking for. Something out of place. What doesn't fit? What shouldn't be here by traditional
Yeah.
standards? Is the ground disturbed in a certain way? Does it look like something came through here? If I brush away these leaves, am I going to find a footprint? Sasquatch is traditionally being taller and wider. You want to look at, are there broken branches? If I walk through the woods, I break some branches. Occasionally I leave a print. I would expect that they do something similar. So you kind of want to look for things that look like something has come through there. That doesn't mean a Sasquatch went through there, but that means something went through there. It also could have just been a bad storm a week ago and it snapped a few branches and, but it's where do you start? You've got to look for something that's out of place, something that would indicate something happened that's unusual.
One thing you mentioned, I want to come back to this. And you mentioned something that I think would be an ultra valuable tool, and if not, actually work with a network. You could probably get a network working on this, but those trail cameras, people. I mean, that's I've seen trail camera videos. I've seen some of those folks on YouTube. Man, they're impressive. They're very unintrusive. Unless you know that they're there, you're not seeing them. As far as animals going to them, there's only one animal that's really a threat to a trail camera, and that's only because they have some of the most incredible freaking noses ever. That's bears. I've that's
It's
the
silverback
bear.
gorillas.
Not like bears. I've seen this
Worse.
guy put out his camera. I've seen this guy put out his camera in Florida, and it's been out there for 3 weeks. Bears will come by there, stop, turn around, sniff the person who touched the camera left, come straight to that camera. Other animals will just won't even pay attention. They won't smell anything, but a bear will always smell. But I just think that the trail cameras, during trying to find a migration path. Like I know that there's a migration path in South America for the jaguar, and they have cameras down there, and every year the jaguars go down and up that trail. And to me, I would think that would be a really cool tool to use to try to set up some sort of network. Like if I had if I could put trails, like let's say that the activity for the Sasquatch is March and April. Well, I could lay out my cameras out for a 50-mile radius. That someone else could pick me up from there, and then someone else could pick me up from there. What do you think? I mean, do you think that's something if people could come together, we could get some definitive proof about a Bigfoot?
Maybe, and that's assuming they don't know the cameras are there, and there's some speculation that they might, because people do all sorts of different things. People put out bait, things like that, but traditionally an animal won't avoid a camera, but sometimes the cameras get knocked off. And it could just simply be a squirrel or raccoon being chased by something, or the weather. But there was a group studying gorillas in the Congo, and they had cameras in the trees. And one of the silverback, the females, stopped, and then more of them came, and they were all staring up. And when you watch the footage, after a few minutes, a male came by and started beating its chest, and it was staring at the camera and growling at it. Somehow they knew it was there. Now, I don't know if they could smell it. I don't know. I don't know if they are smart enough to look at it and say that doesn't belong here. But the clan or pack, however you want to call them, I'm not sure what the name for gorillas is, but was gone the next morning. They disappeared over the night when it got dark out, and the camera wasn't night vision, unfortunately, so they couldn't really see anything. All the gorillas were gone. And it's interesting because somehow they knew something was there, and we're operating under the assumption that a Sasquatch is some kind of a primate. So what traits of primates does it have? Silverback gorillas are a larger primate, and if they can somehow detect that a camera is there, perhaps a Sasquatch can too. And that's assuming that they're not smarter than we are, because the truth is we have no idea what their level of intelligence is. And by intelligence, I'm not saying that they could sit down and type a 75-page paper in 2 hours. I'm saying this is their environment. Think of it like this: if I picked you up and dropped you in the Congo, how long would you survive, right? Or
with
both of us together.
Without me, yeah, with or without the cheetah. Hey Dell, how are you?
Even with the cheetah.
That's right.
We probably wouldn't make it through the first night, right? Something would kill us because we would have no measurable intelligence. Because we talk about intelligence, and I don't think we're talking about it in the right way. We talk about intelligence like they can speak English. I'm not saying that. I'm saying intelligence as they're the masters of their environment and they know it. Just like if you dropped a gorilla in the middle of a city, it wouldn't last. It get hit by a car, get hit by a bus, truck. We'd probably shoot it if we're being fair. But if you drop a gorilla in the Congo, it's going to be just fine after a couple of days. It'll adapt very quickly because that's their intelligence. That's their level of intelligence in that environment. Our intelligence is very environmental based. So we talk about Sasquatches because a lot of times people say, well, why do you always say a Sasquatch is super intelligent? If they're that smart, why aren't they communicating with us? I think you're misunderstanding intelligence. I'm saying that their ability to survive and adapt to their environment is extraordinary, and it's come over a very long time. And depending on how far back you want to go and how much you want to debate their origins, if they are in fact the missing link, at one point I think there was 21 or 24 different species of humans all living together at the same time prior to Homo sapiens ultimately winning the battle, whether they bred amongst themselves or the other species killed the other ones out. Somehow we all ended up like us, right? But what if we didn't? What if one of those others, one of those other species did survive? And it's simply just been alongside us all along, and it's always been here. And they just don't populate the same way we do, because most large gorillas will have reproduce once, maybe every 7 to 9 years. Most of them will only have one offspring very often. Sometimes they have two, but that's not necessarily the average. You know what I mean? So you're talking about a very slow reproductive cycle, whereas humans, unfortunately, as we know, there are many people out there that have 10, 15 kids, you know what I mean? And over the years, obviously, our population has exploded because we reproduce at a much faster rate. Larger primates, other than us, typically have a very long period between giving birth. For whatever reason, we do not. We can just go. Every 9 months, we can pop another human out. Most primates cannot do that. In fact, we're the only primate that can that I'm aware of. So assuming that the Sasquatch is, again, in the primate family, they probably will never have the numbers that we have. And they may simply be also more responsible, because think about this too. It's also a matter of survival. How many young squatches can they watch still survive? Because from their perspective, we're probably the biggest predator, right? I mean,
I'm
if
sure.
you were them and you looked at us and how we behave and how we treat each other, and you had any ability to understand just action in general, just simply watching without context, you would probably think that we're barbarians, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and there's different theories behind it. Sometimes I've often wondered if they possess some kind of an instinct that they stay away from us for that reason. It's an instinctual, it's
I,
something in their
I
evolution
think
that
that's,
they've evolved.
yeah. See, that's why
You
I
know,
thought they would evolve. That's why I thought they would evolve from being here in North America with the advancement of technology and the loss of habitat. Just like any other animal, they have to go where the food's at, and it's like, let's say they're used to going to a Farmer Jones's, garden for 2 generations, but they go back and next thing you know, there's a super Walmart there. Well, they're going to have to figure it out. They're going to have to sit there and say, well, we can't come here anymore because there's nothing here. So we'll have to adjust our migration. And to me, I would think that eventually, they would be pushed and, they would go where they're more quiet, like the forest of Pennsylvania or Canada, because there's not very many people in Canada compared to the size of the country.
no, and
It's
most of them
immense.
all live on the East Coast
Right.
or the very far West Coast, but the middle of Canada is pretty much desolate. There's nothing there,
Yeah.
human
And,
wise.
I mean, you think that they would evolve, they would adjust their migration path to basically the least resistance. They're going to go where they can go, and I think that I think if just through natural, I think their migration. Let's say, like I said, I was saying from Montana down to Mississippi. I think eventually what will happen is they would go, instead of going down, they would go north.
I agree.
Uh,
I
see,
think like, as we said earlier with Ohio, it does seem like they have altered their behavior and their presence has migrated south more towards West Virginia. I think in other parts of the country, they've most likely gone towards the Pacific Northwest, would be my guess. And from there, they probably make their way north. I agree. Like Alaska is a perfect example. Alaska has a massive number of sightings every year, and there's disappearances, and there's a lot of history up there. And so are they moving? I think so. Are they adjusting to our building patterns? I don't see how they couldn't, but it's not just them. Every animal is. You know what I mean? That's just what happens when we build a city. The animal life disperses to somewhere else. And I'm sure that they're doing the
they
same
try
thing.
to.
And I don't disagree. If we started building the Pacific Northwest, started booming, and there was a New York-sized city there, they probably would all end up in Canada because that's going to be the last place left for them. They are going to run out of habitat at some point, and that may be why we're seeing them more now too, is because the habitat is somewhat limited in certain areas. Because they're not going to know what we're planning to build. They're not going to know we're planning on putting a city there or a train through there or a highway through there. They're just reacting to what we're doing, and my guess is they probably from time to time do interact with other Sasquatches from different regions. I have a suspicion that their migration patterns overlap. The reason I say that is otherwise their genetic pool would be too limited. Because if you just reproduce, you know what I mean? If you're reproducing, so they must have some kind of migrational pattern where they overlap with other clans of Sasquatch or other groups, or even just some random ones. Just someone to introduce fresh DNA into the mix. My guess is it's a biological imperative. Either that, or they're smart enough to realize that all of a sudden, all these squatches are coming out looking weird. They're acting funny, so there's something wrong, you know. But I would imagine that they've simply evolved in that way, just the same way wolves do. Wolves are typically stay within their own pack, or they'll stay by themselves. But when it comes time for them to mate, wolves will go mate with other packs. Somehow they understand there has to be genetic diversity. And for all we know, the Sasquatch can have that same understanding. And that's part of the reason that they have these migrationary patterns. Part of it's food, part of it's survival. And part of that survival process is their mating rituals, which we don't know anything about that either. That said, are you familiar with the Olympic project up in Washington?
No.
Give it a Google. It's fascinating. There's a documentary that talks about it with Small Town Monsters came out with as well. You can find it on usually Amazon or Tubi has them. But essentially, a logging company discovered, I think they're up to 30 or 40 nests now, and it's hours and hours out there to get to where these nests are. And there's multiple gates to get through because a logging company had it. Luckily, the owner of the logging company is a Sasquatch guy. So he gave a 5-year stay on doing anything with that area and moved to operations elsewhere. And there's a group called the Olympic Project that's been researching it for years. And it's absolutely fascinating. These nests the area has all sorts of wild berries, food, water up there. It's got everything you would need to survive. It's perfect. The Olympic Mountains are in Washington. If you look them up, they're insane. They're high, they're wide, they're thick. And these nests, some of them have been dated back over 30 years. And they can't explain. And there's been zoologists out there. There's been biologists out there from various universities in Washington. And no one can seem to figure out what made these nests. They resemble nests that primates sometimes make.
They probably know what it is, but they're afraid to give it, like to speak it to power. They know it's a squatch, but if they said that, then then they risk being ridiculed. So they'll sit there and say, "Well, we don't know." Well, just be honest with us. Just say, "Hey, if you suspect there's there's the new primate, or if it's a Sasquatch, come out there and say it."
But that's just it, though. But we have to be careful that we don't jump to a conclusion. We have to say, okay, we don't know what this is. We think it could be this, but we don't actually know. So what evidence do we have that it's a Sasquatch? That's where you kind of have to start. And luckily, that's where they started. They scoured the nests. They found a few hair samples. The original samples came back inconclusive.
There had to be blood.
They had traces of what appeared to be human DNA. They had traces of what could be primate DNA, but it was just considered it was an unknown species. And all they were saying is the hair had been out there for a long time, and they couldn't for sure identify what it was or wasn't. But it could have been a couple of different things. Wasn't what anyone was looking for, but at least it narrows it down a little bit because they're saying it could be
exactly,
or it could be a human identified, but the nests resemble primate nests that just on a larger scale. Primates make something similar. The branches that were broken down from the trees were snapped upwards of like 12, 15 feet high. I'm 6'8", and if I reach up, I can't reach that high, let alone snap a tree limb that's as thick as a softball off a live tree and then go try to bend it and weave it into these nests. Something did that. Something was in there. There's something out there. Now, we, of course, all know that it's a Sasquatch, but there's no conclusive proof, at least as of yet, that that's what it is. We all hope that's what it is. Looks like it's going that way.
Camera. Maybe they could put some cameras on there, or during the time of the when they think that they're going to be there, they could put not only cameras, but they could put drop microphones on there, pick up sounds. We have gone way past our time, which has been absolutely a blast. I definitely want you to come back again if you would like to.
I'd love to.
This is a lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking to you, Brian. This has just been this is fun. Dell is here. It's his favorite Bigfoot media with Andre the Giant playing the role and battling Lee Majors. I thought it was Ted Cassidy for some reason.
No, it was Andre the Giant.
Was it Andre?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Andre.
Okay. Was it for all three appearances or just for the first one? Because remember he popped up.
I always assumed it was Andre for all three.
Okay,
right now.
I know. I know that they did two with Steve Austin, and they did one with Jimmy Summers.
Yeah.
I love that. That's one of my favorite episodes for sure, for sure. Andre, that would be really cool if it was. I thought it was the guy who played Lurch on the Addams Family, but I guess like it looks like I'm wrong. I know it wasn't Richard Keel. That's the only thing I know of. Though Richard Keel did pop up there on Land of the Lost, which is another interesting TV series. All right. Real quick, what do you got planned? Or what do you got on your calendar as far as investigations go? Are you are you getting ramped up for the winter investigations? Are you gonna be, or do you guys just shut it down during the bad weather and then come back during the spring? Do you have any conventions or any
So
any
I'll be
paranormal?
at the Ohio Bigfoot Jamboree on October 4th. That'll be the next Bigfoot kind of conference in Ada, Ohio. It'll be a great time. There'll be a ton of speakers. There's going to be a lot of different investigators from all over the country there. We're all getting together the night before at some hotel. We're going to kind of swap notes and things like that. And then we're heading into, in my opinion, cryptid season, because the temperatures will finally start dropping into the 50s and 60s at night, so you can sleep in a tent without sweating to death.
Right,
Probably
right.
once we start getting below 60 at night, I'll start looking to book my first trip to Salt Fork for the fall season. And then I'll probably head down to West Virginia. There's a couple spots I'm interested in checking out that have had sightings recently. There's a few in Michigan. We had one in Monroe, Michigan, which is about an hour and a half from here, that
Okay.
there was a sighting recently. I'd like to spend some time in some of the woods up there, just looking around and kind of getting a feel for the area and things like that. And then once the winter hits, then it's back into the kind of the haunted houses for a while. I'll probably do Mansfield Reformatory does overnight. I've gone there a few times. It's always interesting. And then I'm always looking for different places to go. There's a couple places I found in Southern Ohio that you can rent, have been turned into Airbnbs, and have had a lot of reported activity for years and years. So I'll be checking out some of those and setting up gear. And then, other than that, our first podcast drops this upcoming Monday night. So then we'll be doing a weekly episode of that, and we'll probably be talking about our investigations. We'll be having different guests on. We'll be kind of exploring. We'll be going down the rabbit hole. Each episode, kind of a different theory behind pretty much everything from lost civilizations to cryptids to paranormal. Is it connected? Is it not connected? You might be surprised when you dig deep into this stuff, when you start to run into similarities and see how connected things really are. I spend a lot of hours researching, and it surprises me sometimes still to find something and say, wait a minute, didn't I just come across that over here doing something completely different? And sure enough, you did. And so we'll be talking about things like that and kind of some of the theories we have going on out there. And we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, yeah. Now, your podcast that you be dropping, will that be a visual podcast like this one, or
Yes.
will that be? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
it'll be on our YouTube channel. It'll be on the Cryptid Paranormal website too, cryptidparanormal.com.
Okay.
And it'll probably stream to Facebook and TikTok. We'll do all that good stuff.
Okay.
We're set up on StreamYard as well. So.
All right. I'll be looking forward to that. And we put the description. We'll put your Facebook page down there, and then we'll put the YouTube page in the description box. And if people want to get more information, they can zip on over there and check that out. I want to thank you again for coming in and talking with us. Sorry about I still think now that we're talking about it, I do think we did have some paranormal activity tonight, beginning of the show.
Could have been.
Stand with that. I'm going to stand on that, and that was sort of spooky. It was funny because I just got a brand new phone. It died out. It kept on dying out. I'm like, I'm only talking about some ghosts here, and then you got bumped. And I'm telling you, the forces were arrayed against the good guys, but we prevailed and had a great time. And we'll talk to you guys. We'll talk to you soon. I want to thank my chat for coming out and hanging out with us. I had a fun time. Dell, thank you for coming in. On Thursday, we'll be back on Thursday. We'll be back talking with our actress Amber Brooke. Will be here with us. at 8 o'clock, and we'll talk more things horror and acting and alternative art and all sorts of other fun activities. But to everybody else who watched it or watching the replay, thank you for being here, and we will see you soon. Stay right where you're at for one more minute, and then I'm going to say goodnight to the rest to the rest of everybody. Peace. Good night, everybody.